What began the day as a walk in the park became a full-on battle for Hideki Matsuyama, but in the end, the former Masters champion, a winner at the St. Jude. Matsuyama entered the day with a 5-shot lead, fully squandered on the back nine with some spotty play, but righted the ship with birdies at 17 and 18 to claim the check as we now head to the second leg of the playoffs. Not the straightforward Sunday we saw coming in with more. CBS Sports golf analyst Kyle Porter and Rick Gehman. Fellas, not since the Porter tweet of 2019 have we seen this sort of drama out of Memphis, but it was something to behold here the final 2 hours there. Hideki Matsuyama welcoming all others into this conversation, but in the end walks away. KP, talk to me about how he handled that attrition and what you saw over those final 2 holes, him righting the ship to walk away the winner.
Well, I think experience comes into play here, right? Where you've got Hideki, who's won now 10 times on the PGA Tour and won, about everything you can win in the world. Won the Masters, won at Riv earlier this year. If you've got a 3, 4, 5-stroke lead in the middle of your final round, that you've got some room to make some mistakes, and he made a bunch of mistakes. It's one thing to say it, though. It's another thing to mentally recover from those mistakes and do what he did, which is birdie the final 2 holes. You'll see the first one here. This was kind of a bomb on 17. Really impressive. This, to me, once you hit the tee shot on 18 and get it in play, it's kind of over after that. He had an exclamation point on 18, but I just thought he was so impressive mentally. Again, he's a veteran. He knows that he's got room to play with. But then to capitalize on that room and to go out and birdie the last 2, that's big boy stuff, and it was a big boy win from Hideki.
And I'm glad you brought up 18 specifically, Rick, Kyle, because Rick, it was not the percentage play. He draws one at the water with the tee ball, really took some fortitude to do that, and then flags one just about the number to carry that water. The approach play throughout the week really was the hallmark. When it escapes a player, it usually doesn't come back that quickly. What stood out to you about all that was this final 9 holes for Matsuyama?
Yeah, well, Hideki certainly does not lack confidence. We know that. So he's able to take angles and directions that many of us wouldn't even consider, or many of his peers wouldn't even consider. But, guys, we've got to remember, I mean, this was a walk in the park until he got to the 12th hole, and he was approached by a rules official just asking questions about a divot, a ball mark that he tapped down earlier in the round, and everything was all good. But it almost threw him sideways, because that's when things started to get away from him. And Joe, to your point about being able to regain that ball striking ability, I think Hideki took a couple of deep breaths and realized that he is one of the best flushers that we have on planet Earth, and he kind of leaned into those strengths over the last couple of holes. And without the excellent putting that we saw from him this week, maybe it's another ball striking performance that goes without a trophy, but he rolled it beautifully. And as both of you guys have said, the ability to get things back on track is very difficult to do, and he certainly did it here over the final 2 holes.
Again, Matsuyama doing it without his support system as well. His coach and his caddy stuck in London following a robbery that took their passports, unable to get over here. They will be in tow here for the BMW, so it's back with his normal support system. But again, winning in the absence of normal is hard for these guys to do. Often creatures of habit, and he gets out of habit here and walks away with another win to go with the Genesis earlier on this season. Kyle asked you a question in the break here, Rick, and he asked you if your boy was back. We're referring to Viktor Hovland here, who in a way let off the hook by the birdie at 18. He would have been kicking himself if not for Matsuyama making that final putt. He had an opportunity at number 18 himself, but the play about as sharp as we've seen it since last year's BMW and Tour Championship. What stood out to you about Viktor Hovland, and what brings out the best in him this time of year?
Yeah, it just hasn't been a good year for Viktor. He was very transparent before the start of the FedEx St. Jude Championship on why that was, and he talked a lot about just losing his pattern and the ability to control his club face. And what we had talked about earlier this week on the First Cut podcast was it felt like Viktor was close, and when it does click for him, he's going to be back. It's one of those things that once he figures out the feel, he has very good body control, and he's able to repeat that feel over and over and over again. What I saw was a golfer who finished inside the top 5 in both of the ball striking categories. That's strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained approach. He lost about a stroke to the field around the greens, and he picked up a few with the putter. That profile right there, that is vintage Viktor Hovland. That's not the 2023 FedEx Cup version of Viktor where he could also chip as well, but this is plenty good to contend at difficult golf courses with the best players in the world. So I believe we are very close. If not, we are back with Viktor here. And I think what I was telling you guys is next week in Colorado is also going to be a pretty good setup for him.
Yeah, I think the counter to that, Rick, is we saw this at the PGA Championship, or we thought we saw this at the PGA Championship. Where he plays very good golf. He finishes third. He was very good from tee to green. It was a golf course that at Valhalla that allowed him to kind of get away with some chipping in some longer rough. It wasn't the really tight lies that we see sometimes at major championships. And then he kind of fell off after that. He didn't play very well this summer, really up until this week at Memphis. So I'm a little wary. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So I'm a little wary about declaring Viktor back. I am encouraged by the play because, like you said, from tee to green, he was awesome. Around the green, still, it was kind of typical what we've seen from Viktor over the course of his career. But I'd love to see it like twice in a row, maybe even 3 weeks in a row. But it does look like he's going to get the opportunity, moving up to 16th in the FedEx Cup standings and putting himself in position at least to defend not only his BMW next week, but also the Tour Championship and FedEx Cup the week after at East Lake.
I'm going to do the other Kyle Porter tweet now. Viktor Hovland beat by a total of 1 golfer over the last 3 playoff events, and it's really brought out the best in him. We will see what he can do at the BMW, albeit a different location. We'll have a full preview of Castle Pines coming up shortly, but the top 50 now do move on to the BMW guys, and with that, the invites to all of next year's signature events. But there are some signature names that we saw their seasons come to a close today or even earlier. Who are you most disappointed by their performance this week and throughout the season, KP?
Well, I think the name that sticks out, obviously Jordan Spieth is up there. You could throw a couple other guys at it, Minwoo Lee, your guy, Joe. But Justin Rose, to me, is somebody that really came on strong at the end of this year, right? He played awesome at the Open Championship and had a real opportunity to play his way into the top 50. There was a couple guys that were inside that top 50 that nearly played their way out. Keegan Bradley was one of them. But Rose had a great first round here. He was really primed to make a little bit of a run and get into that top 50. So I thought the way his season ended over these last 3 rounds was kind of a disappointment. But I think overall there's not any huge names or big superstars that stick out. Spieth with the injury, obviously a little bit, and we can maybe talk about that later. We'll probably talk about it a lot on the First Cut podcast. But Justin Rose to me is a guy, just because of his recent resurgence, is somebody that a little bit stands out of not making that top 50.
Yeah, I've opted to go with Tom Kim here, and I think this is disappointing on a couple of different layers here, guys. Firstly, 2024 was not an awesome year for Tom, but he was definitely trending in the right direction. He was getting back on track. We saw some decent finishes this summer, and it looked like he was in position to make a deep run in the playoffs, and he was in that position very late into Sunday's final round. And then the way that he finished that round, so he goes bogey on 16, double on 17, double on 18, and effectively misses out on advancing by 1 shot. He finishes 51st in the FedEx Cup standings. If Nick Dunlap does not make a par on the 72nd hole, it's actually Tom Kim who would have jumped back in. So just a lot of ways that this was a disappointing year from basically January 1st all the way until the last shot that was hit in Memphis this week.
I know criticism often is lobbed at the current setup of the FedEx Cup playoffs, but when it comes down to a shot, and it's that exacting of a shot in January or a shot here in August, it does certainly make it interesting to watch these guys in those final moments of pressure and what they do. Justin Rose finds the lip of that bunker. Tom Kim finds squares coming home, and they both find the end to their season. KP, let's talk about Jordan Spieth here for a second, because he was always seemingly on the outside looking in, both literally and metaphorically this season, but made news at the conclusion of his round, going to undergo wrist surgery, in his words, as soon as possible. No current qualifications for the signature events next year. OWGR, FedEx Cup points. He's just not in it right now. A bit of a career crossroads as we sort of assess what is Jordan Spieth. How do you answer that question where we currently stand?
Well, how many segments do we have to work through this? It was interesting to hear him say this after his round, because he's alluded to it all year. Even back to the Masters, Rick, whenever we were sitting in the interview room in his kind of pre-tournament press conference there, he alluded to the wrist and surgery and kind of everything that went along with that. It's a weird time for Spieth. Listen, he's going to get all the sponsor exemptions that he wants or needs into the signature events in 2025. Which, again, I don't love that, but that's just the reality of the situation. It's good business for the PGA Tour. It's great for Jordan Spieth. So I don't think there's a ton of worry about kind of the schedule that he's going to play in 2025. But I do think there's some worry about, like, hey, what kind of iron player, what kind of approach play player is Jordan Spieth right now? He was bad in 2024. He was not good. It was one of the better driving seasons he's ever had, statistically the best of the last 9 years, and he couldn't take advantage of it. And he didn't really put himself in contention to win outside of the first month of the year. And so I look at 2025 and say, okay, you've had surgery, you're recovered, hopefully, and you're back. Are you still a good iron player? Are you still one of the top 20 iron players in the world? Because if not, then I think the next 10 years looks different than maybe we thought it was going to look as we've been following his career all along. So hopefully he gets back to there, but I think that's one massive storyline to keep an eye on as we head into 2025.
Not long ago, sat on the throne of the sport, and how quickly things can change. When we take a look at the top of today's current game, it seems like there's staying power, but a lot of things can change in a short amount of time. We'll keep an eye on what Jordan Spieth is post-surgery, because wrist surgeries and golfers, it's a story told before and not one you tell all that fondly. As we take a look at your biggest movers here, 3 in, 3 out. Viktor Hovland started on the outside. Now he's well within, as Kyle Porter said, all the way up to 16 with this finish near the top of the leaderboard. Scared it and even had the lead late in this round. Tom Kim from 43 to 51. Mackenzie Hughes also missing it alongside Jake